Hi folks, welcome to lesson 2.8. We're on page 138 up at the top. Okay, so we're going to look at slope and the y-intercept in slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b. So folks, the slope is also called your rate of change. So remember we found slope, rise over run, or y minus y over x minus x, or if the line's proportional, if it goes through 0, 0, you can pick any point on the line and do y divided by x. And then the y-intercept, remember, that's where your line crosses the y-axis or touches the y-axis. That's called the initial value. Okay, so slope is another word for rate of change, and the y-intercept, where the line crosses the y-axis, is another word for initial value. Okay, so let's find the initial value and the rate of change. All right, so let's do the rate of change. Remember, that's your slope. That is your slope. And then the y-intercept, which is the initial value, that's where the line crosses the y-axis. So let's do that one first, actually. Okay, so here's your y-axis. This line is touching at 0. So your initial value is 0. Okay, so now rate of change. So I'm noticing that this graph is counting by quarters. So this is 0.25, 0.50, 0.75, 1. So every line is counting by quarters. Okay, so if I find 2 points on the line to do rise over run, if I rise a quarter, I went only up one line and every line's counting by a quarter, and then over a quarter, 50 cents, so I went over 0.50, and this line is going down, folks, so my rise is 0.25, my run is 0.50, so when you divide that, you get a half. And it is absolutely negative. This line is going down from left to right. So your slope is negative a half. Okay, so let's try initial value is 0. Rate of change is negative a half. Let's take a look at this one. Let's find the initial value. Initial value where the line crosses the y-axis. So right here, that's where it's going to touch or cross the y-axis. So let's figure out what that number is. Okay, so it's 0, skips a line, and then 0.4. So every line is counting by 0.2, 0.4, 0.6, 0.8, 1, 0.0, or 1, 1.2, 1.4, 1.6, 1.8. There it is. So your initial value, or the y-intercept, is 1.8. Now let's find the rate of change, the slope, rate of change. Okay, so now I'm going to find 2 points that land on this line. I'll use these two. And I could either use y minus y over x minus x or rise over run. I'm going to use rise over run. So I know every line's counting by 0.2. So if I rise, that is 0.2. I went up one line. And if I run one line, that's 0.2. So 0.2 divided by 0.2 is 1. And this line is going down. So my slope, my rate of change is negative 1. Okay, let's keep going. So we're going to look at page 139 at the top, folks. Look at page 139. Okay, so this says the y-intercept is the point where the graph crosses the y-axis. Okay, so the line crosses at the point. All right, where does this line cross the y-axis at? Well, let's take a look. So I need to figure out how my line's counting. So every line is counting by 2s, 2, 4, 6, 8, and it's in the middle of 6 and 8. So that would have to be 7. So 0, 7 is the ordered pair, 0, 7. So 0, 7. So the y-intercept is 7. Remember, the y-intercept is your initial value. That's the same as your y-intercept, initial value. Okay, so folks, let's find the y-intercept, which is your initial value. All right, where does the line touch the y-axis? All right, we're down in the negatives. Remember, above 0 is positive, below 0 is negative. So negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4. So the initial value, your y-intercept, is negative 4. Okay, now let's find the rate of change, the slope, rate of change. Okay, so I'm going to start here, and I'm going to find another point. Okay, so I can rise 1. Everything's counting by 1s. Rise 1 and run 1, 2, 3, 4. Rise over run. 1/4, this line's going up, so it's positive. So your rate of change, your slope, is 1/4, 1/4. Okay, find the y-intercept. The y-intercept where the line touches the y-axis is 0. That is your initial value, 0. Okay, let's take a look at number 9. So this one says, how high was the balloon when it began its descent? How high was the balloon? Folks, that is asking for your initial value, the y-intercept. Okay, so it was at 80 meters. So there's your initial value. And to explain that initial value, the balloon was at 80 meters before it began to go down, before it began its descent. That's what the y-intercept means. The balloon was 80 meters high before it began to go down. Okay, so let's take a look at this one. Again, what is the y-intercept of the graph? What is it and what does it represent? Okay, so your y-intercept is your initial value. Remember, the y-intercept is the initial value. So right here is where the line touches the y-axis. So the initial value is 0. The y-intercept is 0. Now, it says explain what that means. Well, this is about Joshua and how much gas he has in his canister before he starts to fill it. So this 0 means he had 0 gas in his canister before he started to fill it. After he started to fill it, this is how much gas was in the canister per however many seconds. Okay, let's take a look at a few more. Okay, so the line models the temperature on a certain winter day since sunrise. What's the y-intercept? What does it represent? Okay, well, temperature since sunrise. So here's your y-intercept. So your initial value is 4. Your initial value is positive 4. That means, so to explain that, that means it was 4 degrees before the sun started to rise. See, this is how many degrees it was after the sunrise. But your y-intercept is, it was 4 degrees before the sun started to rise. Okay, so let's do one more. So your friend incorrectly makes this graph as an example of a line with a y-intercept of 3. Explain your friend's possible error. Well, your friend says the y-intercept was 3, but clearly, look, -1, -2, -3, -4. The y-intercept is really -4, the initial value. Okay, so basically your friend mixed up the x and y axis. So look, the x-intercept is 3, where the line crosses the x-axis. But the y-intercept is really -4. So your friend accidentally mixed up the x and the y-axis. Okay, remember, your y-intercept is where the line crosses the y-axis, the initial value. So this would be -1, -2, -3. That would be the y-intercept or initial value. This would be +1, 2, 3. This one would be +3. Okay, I hope that helps.